Buonasera a tutti. Due parole di presentazione del professore Eckhard König, che è diciamo un po' un habitué perché credo che sia almeno il suo terzo intervento al circolo linguistico. Attualmente è professore emerito all'Università di Friburgo e alla Freie Universität di Berlino ed è momentaneamente, appunto per questo mese, visiting professor presso l'Università di Firenze. Di parole ce ne sarebbero tante da dire, io farò una specie veramente di super silloge della sua, diciamo così, carriera accademica da un punto di vista puramente, possiamo dire, didattico. Ha insegnato all'Università di Hannover gran parte della sua attività presso l'Università, la Freie Universität. Durante questi anni è stato per ben 3 volte visiting professor, è stato per ben in 3 università più volte visiting professor nelle università americane, tra cui l'Università di Stanford e la University of South California. È stato praticamente membro della Commissione europea per i progetti di ricerca, soprattutto di linguistica, fino praticamente al 2010. Adesso è membro di 2 associazioni francesi, sempre di progetti di ricerca. Ha vinto per la sua attività soprattutto di rapporti di internazionalizzazione e di coinvolgimento nei suoi progetti di colleghi stranieri, nel 2002 il Max Planck Award per appunto International Cooperation, grazie al quale poi, diciamo così, molti degli attuali docenti di linguistica inglese, tra cui Volker Gast, Florian Haas e in parte, anche se diciamo in uscita, anche Korfman, hanno diciamo potuto avere le loro ricerche sponsorizzate e diciamo portate avanti. Le sue pubblicazioni superano le 2 centinaia, anche di parecchio. Ricordo soprattutto una impresa, che abbiamo anche qui i volumi, che è praticamente stato il progetto di ricerca Eurotype, dove sono stati coinvolti più di 122 diciamo studiosi che hanno riflettuto sulla tipologia su una tipologia europea in 20 lingue diverse. Oggi ci parla di uno degli ultimi suoi lavori che uscirà fra poco in un volume, ed è diciamo, lo studio di approcci tipologici e comparativi nell'analisi delle lingue germaniche. Lascio la parola a Duccio e al professor König.
Grazie. Grazie di cuore, Letizia, per una introduzione molto gentile ma esagerata, certamente. Fake news, il nome moderno. Questa è la terza volta che mi date l'opportunità di presentare alcune delle mie idee in una riunione del circolo. Grazie mille per l'invito. L'ultima volta era o è stata 2 anni fa. Sì. In frattempo ho imparato un po' di italiana, la lingua italiana, ma e non è abbastanza buono il risultato non è abbastanza buono per presentare la mia comunicazione in italiano. Devo usare l'inglese, purtroppo. Okay, so after having given a sample of the progress I made I've been learning Italian for 3 years now. It's wonderful. It's a new life. It makes you happy. So if anybody is looking for something to do in his or her spare time, let me recommend you to learn a new language. It's great fun. Okay, so the general background of what I'm going to talk about is comparative linguistics, comparing languages. And you can, I would like to do it in the following way. I want to talk about the Germanic languages. Of course, they have a common history. They started out from the same beginning. Of course, they are a family and a branch of European languages and Indo-European languages. And I would like to do that by comparing English with the different subsets of the world's languages. First of all, the subset or a representative sample of the world's languages. See what comes out, what is special in Germanic languages if you take such a global perspective. Secondly, I would like to consider Europe, what is special about Germanic languages in Europe. Thirdly, some people have claimed that there is such a thing as, I have to use the German term, as a European Sprachbund, that is, languages which have not a common history also show similarities. So we'll ask how English is faring within that, in that comparison. And finally, I will talk about also comparisons between two languages in order to add depth to breadth. So this can be represented in terms of concentric circles. I apologize for the clumsiness of my diagram. I've never been very good at drawing, and it wasn't part of my final exam. Otherwise, I would have failed my Abitur. Okay, so the major points then will be, as I said, there are types, to point out that there are types of comparative linguistics differentiated in terms of the set of languages taken as standard of comparison. Compare Germanic languages with different groups of languages on the other hand. And in doing this, I will exploit the full potential of language comparison for the characterization of language families, of regional or areal phenomena, as we say, and of individual languages. Now, very often when you look up, I could give you the literature, but I don't want to not to make nasty remarks about colleagues. What they come up when they characterize the Germanic languages, they say, oh, they lost in their history a lot of inflectional distinctions. True. I mean, we lost a lot of things on the way to the present day, but there's so much more to reveal and to point out, and particularly if one, as I will do, include questions of meaning and semantics and the lexicon into such a comparison. Totally new things become visible. And of course, we also see then new aspects of how languages can differ from each other. Because the overriding goal of comparative linguistics is to see how languages are similar, how they differ from each other, and what are the limits of variation. So what is the unity in diversity? There are certainly limits. Now, okay. Now, if you, my first point is a comparison between Germanic languages and a representative sample of the world's languages. There have been very, very neat methods developed to select a representative sample. You know, you take only one member of a family. You never take two languages which are the neighbors, and so on and so forth. So this can be done. And if you do this, there are about three, depending on our count, of four properties which are specific to Germanic languages. The first one is the order of elements. Very often people say word order. It's not really word order, but order of building blocks in a sentence in the main clause, in the main proposition. And this is, of course, called the verb second phenomenon. Germanic languages are verb second. They are whatever you can start with anything, but the second element in the sentence building block has to be the verb. English is an exception, except for some residual examples. So, by the way, I will always point out, or I will try to point out if I don't forget it, that sometimes you get an exception to what I say, and in 80% of the cases it's English. Let's say in some cases it's Yiddish, but English is usually the odd man out, as you say. It is special and it doesn't show so neatly. It's not a very typical Germanic language. It's heavily under the influence of French, Scandinavian. So okay, so this is the first property that I like to mention, and the second one concerns the formation of questions, yes, no questions. You know, in Germanic language, you do it by changing the order of subject and verb. In Italian, you do not do any change. You simply have the sentence as it is, as a declarative sentence, and you raise the intonation. I think I have an example somewhere. Yes, il ministro è innamorato. Talking about your minister for culture, long time ago, the Storia Sentimentale, which was in the news a lot. That's when I wrote the handout. Okay, so this is something special in what you do in Germanic. You change the order between the two elements. But let me illustrate now with examples. But you know all this. The second phenomenon. You know, I have a Swedish example because I had to write the paper for something which for an encyclopedia. They insisted all Germanic languages are equally good, and you have to give examples from all of them. So if a Swedish example, whatever you start with, köpte or German kaufte, is always the second element, the main clause. This is rare in the world's languages. That's why it is interesting. It's not very frequent. I've given now under two examples from German where you see if you have an interrogative like die kaufte Lars gestern das Buch, then you can start with a subject. Lars kaufte gestern das Buch. You can have das Buch kaufte Lars gestern, the object, and you see everywhere the verb in the second position. Gestern, yesterday. Yesterday bought Lars the book. It's very, very, and even if you put the verb in first position, you use something like English do, empty verb, and then you could kaufen tat Lars das Buch gestern. Okay, so this is the first property. Now the second one, as I said, the formation of yes/no questions. So this English can be included. The only difference between English and the other languages is that if you change the order of subject and predicate, you can only do this with a limited group of verbs, the so-called auxiliary verbs. So you cannot say, come you tomorrow, but you have to say, will you come tomorrow, or do you come tomorrow? You can only use a very limited set of verbs, not even 20, which can change, can be in first position before the subject. And that is the special role of the so-called auxiliary verbs, which you also have in Italian, but in Italian, they're not so separate from the others. Quite similar. I will come back to this. So I have the example, the chancellor will come tomorrow, and in this case, the glossing it into English would be, comes the chancellor already tomorrow. That's how German does it. So any verb can be in first position, and then you get an interrogative. In Italian, as I said, Giovanni è malato, you don't do anything except change the intonation. And what Germanic languages do is rare. Very often you add something at the end or at the beginning. In French, you add est que Jean est malade. And in Japanese, you add ka at the end, so this is not very frequent either. So it's good for characterization. Third thing you will remember from learning a language like English, German, or whatever, in Germanic languages there are no empty pronouns. In Latin, Italian, and many Romance languages, generally except for French, you can simply say canta. he sings. There's no need to have a subject. If the subject is given in the context, in German and English, and even in French, it's impossible. There are no zero subjects. There are no empty subject positions. And the fourth property is a matter of inflection. In Germanic language, you get two types of verbal inflection, which you do not get in Italian. Italian, there's only in this sense only one type. In German, you get either inflection through vowel change, called historically Ablaut, vowel gradation, or you'd have a suffix at the end, which you have in Italian generally. So I've picked two verbs which are essentially for our survival, to drink. So drink, drank, drunk, you get it, it's all different languages, but always the same verb. And you see the vowel changes, and that's how you do it, how you inflect in that language. And then I take work, worked. Drinking and working then can summarize for some people a life. And so this is a fourth property. And you see that these four properties already tell you quite a bit about Germanic languages if you consider them among the world's languages. Now, if you restrict your perspective to Europe, you get a different additional information. Remember that I already mentioned the so-called auxiliary verbs, and the modal verbs are part of the auxiliary verbs. It's very difficult. I don't know whether you've ever tried to tell somebody what modality is. It's very difficult. The easiest way is to say, oh, it's something like possible and necessary. The easiest way. Then if you look at definitions in the internet or in grammars, and they tell you it's a perspective on reality. But why is possible? This is possible, or you can do this. You may do this. Perspective on reality. I was simply mention this way of defining this by giving an illustration. Okay, now modal verbs have a different history, special history in Germanic, because they, in contrast to the other European languages, they derive from special verbs, from a limit which already had special properties in older stages. Preterite presence, they were called, and the only important thing I'd like to mention, they have very special behavior. They certain things they can do and certain things they cannot do. In English, there's a total separation. In the other languages, there isn't, and of course, in Romance language, there isn't. You have for putere, dovere, you have exactly the same paradigm as you have for other verbs. And in English, these are very special, and they are, and only mention that they are. They don't inflect. Normally, they don't have non-finite forms. They cannot be the main predicate of a sentence. That's very important. They cannot be the main predicate, which is not true of Italian. It's not true of also some Germanic languages. English is very an extreme case. Now, so let me give you examples where. I already mentioned that in English, it's radically the case. You cannot begin a question or one of these verbs, and one of these verbs can never be the main predicate. It could still be the case in Shakespearean plays, because I must away. It's still possible. Today, it's not possible. Or you could say, in German, you can say, ich kann Albanisch. And you have to say, I can speak Albanian. It cannot be the main predicate. See, they are very, very special. And these special verbs, modal verbs, are also a characteristic feature of Germanic languages considered in the context of Europe. See that, but not all languages are so radical as differentiating them completely. In Swedish and Dutch, in the Dutch you can say dat kan niet. It means that cannot be the case. It can be the main predicate, and in Swedish you can combine them. In English you cannot combine them. because they're all finite forms. It's odd, you know. Must, I must. If you have in a dictionary must, it's not an infinitive. It means I must, you must, he must, or we must. It's simply, it's always finite. Okay, so this is the modal verbs, and I've given you on the diagram, there's a strict differentiation in English. German and Dutch, North Germanic are no, German and Dutch are in the middle, and North Germanic, there's a weak representation. And as I already mentioned, early modern English, time of Shakespeare, was very much like modern German. I must away was possible when it has to be, I must go now, or I must be off. B is then the, okay. So this is now in the context of Europe is something which strikes your attention, strikes the eye as far as the special properties of Germanic languages are concerned. And of course, I mentioned only what these verbs cannot do, but they are very, very important in English. In English, where does not go, the negation goes to the first auxiliary verb. So he comes not is impossible, but he doesn't come. And because of that, if you have no other auxiliary verb, you have to introduce do, and that's the do periphrasis, as it is called, which is such a characteristic element and has to be taught to our little children when they start learning English. Okay, a second point I would like to mention is the structure of the noun phrase. And here, also in the context of Europe, and I'd like to mention, also for reasons of time, only two properties, and one concerns the genitive. Genitive is a totally respectable case. Latin had 6, genitive was one of them. German has preserved 4. And what do these other Germanic languages do? They have developed, or they have changed the genitive marker into something which can combine with a whole phrase. So we can say, the girl who lives next door's dog bit me. It's not the door's dog, but it's the girl who lives next door. It's the dog. And there's not a genitive marker anymore. It's like a preposition that comes in the end, sort of a kind of postposition or an adposition. It's something which you find in Germanic languages in general, and in this case, German and Icelandic are an exception. So the genitive develops into something that combines, or the Queen of England's hat. Or now you have to say the King of England's crown, Charles I think it's the third, yes. And you get this in the other Germanic languages too. And another thing which is also striking, that if you English and behaves very much like Italian when it comes to a complex participle. You know, so I've given you an example under 13c. Un uomo esperto in queste materie. In English, exactly, a man experienced in these matters. But in German, you could put everything to the front. Ein in diesen Dingen erfahrener Mann. Actually, you could have very long elements, like more like relative clauses. Some people have said some relative clauses in German can be preposed to the noun. They can occur in front of the noun. And then, of course, also another thing would be that in Germanic languages, you do not get the opposition between adjectives before the noun, adjectives afterwards. So I think, for example, una certa signora, but una cosa certa. Different. And the English is, I don't know whether Italian, I know my French is much better than my Italian. In French, it's very frequent. I don't know whether in Italian it's so very frequent, you know, can you say una grande signora, una signora grande? Also a difference? Yes. Okay, that's exactly what you get in French. You know, lots of them, and there's always a difference in meaning. Not always, no, because in French you have also the saying, it is a question of a white hat or a hat white, meaning there's no, it's totally unimportant. Okay, so and the examples that I given which show this are, of course, there's an example from Dutch and from Swedish. Not so important. Okay, so now we've identified certain properties interesting when we take a global perspective, typology. Then there are interesting perspectives and interesting results, and also properties of Germanic revealed when we only look at Europe. And in Europe, Germanic language have two of the properties which I mentioned. There are more, but for reasons, of course, of time and space, I have not only selected a few. Now, the third method of comparison is to compare the Germanic languages, which in a subgroup of European languages, which have been called standard average European. And this is a Sprachbund, a German term, is internationally established. And people have noticed that there are languages which are not genetically related, like for instance, Albanian and Bulgarian or Romanian. They're totally different from different families. Because they are neighbors, they have similar properties. So the question is, are there sort of properties that identify sort of a central area of Europe because these languages are neighbors? And what has been, what is said very often, that the definite and indefinite article by no means a universal thing. The definite article is quite widespread. The indefinite article is not, that a language has both articles, uno or un and la, le, is rare. And this is a special, by all means, a special property, we can say, for languages in a certain center area of Europe. Which languages do not have articles? Slavic languages, the Finno-Ugrian, Finnish, and so on and so forth, don't have articles. Slavic, one exception is Bulgarian, and what else? Yeah, Turkish, the Turkic language that don't have articles. So it's by no means such a general phenomenon, but it seems to be particularly occur in the center of Europe, center in the broad sense of the word. Okay, now to say, but it's very clear where articles come from. They come from demonstratives. From ille, you get le in Italian, and uno gives rise to, or unus gives rise to uno or un, if you take Latin as a point of departure. That is very, very clear. Now, what I said is also very clear that these languages, these articles are widespread. By the way, there seems to be that definite articles are on the rise. So some of our neighbors now also have introduced them. They could say they are à la mode. They are popular, and people start introducing them. Even in Russian dialects, you have them, and in Finnish, it's done exactly in the same way. They take a demonstrative and change it to an article. Now, one thing I would also like to say is that what people very often forget when they talk about that all these European languages have articles, that there's enormous variation in the use of articles. They're not all the same thing. And let me just mention in what way they can differ. They may become before the noun or follow the noun. Bulgarian, they follow the noun, and in Scandinavian languages, they do not stand before. They can inflect or not inflect. In English, they don't inflect the all the time. Some definite articles can still used deictically, accompanied by gesture. In German you can say der or die, but you cannot say the. Okay, so these are very clearly different differences. Um, right. Yes. Okay. In articles, and this is illustrated. The only thing that I illustrate is that language use or the use of articles may differ, and then it's interesting to see um, uh, and what the contexts are, and one of the contexts is in combination with abstract noun and in generic contexts, you get clear differences in the use of articles. Um, in Romance languages, at least in French and Italian, you have to use the article. Les faucons sont des oiseaux de proie. Falcons are birds of prey. In German, you can, but you don't have to use it. So you can say Falken sind Raubvögel or die Falken sind Raubvögel. I cannot see a difference. You can use both. So in English, in Romance language, you have to use it in these generic contexts. In German, you can use it, and in English, you cannot use it. So you have falcons are birds of prey. It's interesting that and this is now the generic context, that is where you do not talk about a particular item, but about the whole class. Genere. Tutto il genere, would it be? Okay, now for abstract nouns, I've picked the example, la solitude est difficile à supporter. In Italian, you also have the definite article. In German, again, die Einsamkeit ist schwer zu ertragen, or Einsamkeit ist schwer zu ertragen. No difference. In English, no article. Loneliness is difficult to live with. Okay, interesting. So, how systematic then the differences can be in certain contexts and the use of the article. Okay. Now, the next striking thing concerning sort of the center, sort of the center block of European languages, how does do Germanics differ from the others? And this, of course, doesn't only include Germanic, but it means simply all the languages which are considered as being part of the Sprachbund. And here, Romance languages and Germanic are totally the same. It is with how do they express reflexivity? You know, reflexivity means that an action starts from, let's say, a person, and the action, and he's not only the one who does the action, but the action goes back to him or her. So John admires, the president of the United States admires himself, would be a case in point. So now there are two types of reflexive markers in Europe, and the languages which belong to the standard average European Sprachbund have reflexive pronouns. Sie in Italian, se in Spanish, sich in German, and so on and so forth. Also in Russian, it's an affix, sia. So these languages have a reflexive pronoun, and some other languages also have something to express reflexivity, but they use something like stesso in Italian, or expressions like, well, can I think of another example? Yeah, there's in Finnish. I'm not sure that I give you the right example in Finnish now. But anyway, Finnish, and it doesn't have it. And English also doesn't have a reflexive pronoun. English lost it. And what did they do? They replaced it by something which has the pronoun and something which is used in all the other languages, namely self. So English uses something that is not a reflexive pronoun, as in the sense of Italian, French, German, Russian, and all the languages, Balkanic languages, but has something special. And this special expression can also combine with nouns, where it's not a reflexive. No, the president of the Consiglio, herself or himself, I don't know how you say, is such a person. See, it's not a reflexive mark in this case. It's some kind of focalization. Salvini himself is not a reflexive marker, and Italian. Okay, so of course Italian can combine the two. And languages can combine a reflexive pronoun with can combine it with stesso. Instead of si, you would have se and se stesso. But you see, these two expressions are not totally the same. Il giornalista si è difeso abbastanza bene. Il giornalisto ha difeso bene il suo amico e se stesso. You see a possibility of combining them, but you see that the strategies in these languages are different. They do not have the same. So Italian doesn't use, say, Giovanni defended self, stesso. It's impossible. It's not a reflexive pronoun. It can combine with a noun, il presidente stesso. But okay, so this is also a characteristic feature of the languages which are called Standard Average European, which includes sort of the majority of European languages. Yes, I've shown you the other use of herself, where you would have stesso in Italian. The guest interviewed on La Sette was Giorgia Meloni herself, or the minister or the minister will organize grandi eventi himself. So in this case, you have stesso or stessa in Italian, and not a reflexive pronoun, and you see that. But the other languages use exactly the same expression that they would use as a reflexive pronoun, exactly also in these contexts. So French would also have ce, il se comporte très bien as a reflexive pronoun, but le président lui-même would be corresponding to stesso, stessa. So this is also a striking thing. You can say the languages of this group called Standard Average European have two different expressions what come out in other languages as the same expression. And the other, stesso, I have, and somebody else before me has suggested they call them intensifiers. It's not an optimal name, but how can we? Some people say adverbs, but il presidente stesso, is that an adverb? Doesn't look like an adverb, really. So I suggest that we still use, yeah. In 18, you have simply a demonstration that if what the difference between se stesso is and si is, namely, it depends on the verb. If you oh no, I had a mistake in my gloss. So if you have verbs like defended, he defended himself, you don't need stesso, or in Swedish, själv. But if you have he attacked himself, you need it. What is the difference? The difference is that languages make, and also you do this in Italian, even though you're not aware of. If it's a matter of things that are, let's say, introvert, then you use simply si. But if it's a question of something which people normally do only to others, and you do it to yourself, then you need to stress it. So you normally do not attack yourself. You defend yourself, but you don't attack yourself. And if you say something, or let's say he insulted himself, you don't insult you. This is not normal. That you, in this case, you would also need in Italian se stesso, and you have it in as a preference in Italian, but you need to have it in many other languages. It's obligatory. Okay. Now, so I've now typology, all languages of Europe, and a center core of languages in Europe, and they've told you what they reveal about the Germanic languages. Now, what I now take is, as a next point, is what has been called micro-typology, sort of ad hoc comparisons, which you simply base on a convenience example. To compare Romance and Germanic languages, do this because it's interesting, but there's no principle of selection. You can also compare German or to Albanian. They're not neighbors. Okay, and what is then here a striking point? But I have to watch also my time. I will now be brief. What is characteristic? You get in all European languages, you get prefixes. In Russian, in the Slavic language, they play an important role. The whole aspectual system is only expressed by prefixes. Okay, and you get separable prefixes of elements which belong to the verb but are separated. These are very often called phrasal verbs. So the example, so you see something like excavare is okay.
Scavare.
Scavare. Oh yes, that's right. You drop the scavare. Yes, and you and you also get aus, but you in German get it in English to dig out. You excavate in English, like Italian, but you have also to dig out. And he dug a valuable statue out, or he dug it out. It can be separated also by material in between. It's part of the verb, but it's separable. It can be you can put things in between, consider in between. So this is something which you notice when you compare Germanic languages with Romance ones, with Slavic ones. This is also a characteristic feature. Okay. Yes, under 5.2, I mentioned something which is where Germanic languages agree with each other, except for English again, so far as they don't have it. In Latin, you have this wonderful construction called participium conjunctum and accusativus cum infinitivo. Things we had. My Latin is much better than my Italian. So I remember this clearly from my Latin classes. And now, many European languages have them. You have the gerundio. French have the gerondive. In Yiddish you have it, and in English you have it. It's an ing form. So, giving examples from English, not trusting anybody, the new president decided to prosecute his opponents. It's the American current context. This is something no Germanic language has other than English. So here they agree. This was also possible in earlier stages of the Germanic languages, like German, but it became out of fashion. Now it looks very, very bookish, and it's like a preacher talking to you. Okay, and then and this is the final scope of comparison. You can compare two languages, and then you can notice interesting things. And one thing, of course, is you look at difference between verbs and objects. I've picked two examples out of this. You can compare. You see, yes, can make a comparison. It can be quite interesting. For instance, people have compared tear and cut and break. And in English, in Dutch, you have tagliare for cut and rompere for break, right? And they differ in the objects they can take. or the German is like Italian, I think. I hope I'm right. Cut. You have break can only be done for something that is rigid. You cannot break a string. You cannot break a string on a guitar. String doesn't break in English. No, in German, die Seite riss. You have to use another verb, and so when you cut something which is flexible, in language like German and Italian. In English, you can use cut for both categories. You can cut. No, excuse me. You can break all of these things. You can say, I broke my tendon. It's a ligament in the back of your foot, and a string on my guitar broke, which you wouldn't be able to do in German or Italian. With rompere or with zerbrechen. Now, there are many studies of this kind. Let me just mention two more examples. Languages differ as far as certain groups of verbs are concerned and their objects. English is poor as far as when it comes to verbs of dressing and undressing. You have two, to dress and to undress. German depends what you put on, or to put on or take off, right? Put on and take off are really the verbs that I want to discuss. In German, you have, depending on where you put it, how much contact it has with your body, and well, these are certainly, and its position, resultant position. No, you use a totally different verb for hat than you would use for a ring. You put on a ring in English, but in German it's anstecken. So these are examples of where languages differ, and where you see, if you compare two languages, these very, very clear differences. So under 22, I've given you examples. To put on a tie or a belt, German would have to be umbinden, because it's round, it's around your body. To put on a hat or to put on glasses would be aufsetzen, totally different verb. And to put on a coat or a ring, coat would be anziehen, and the ring would be aufstecken. So you see, languages may be sensitive to the objects in selecting a verb, and it may be specific properties of the object that require a certain verb. And I will give you another example, because it also puts English and Italian in the same category. And the difference is certain verbs select or express effected objects. That is, the object is created by the verb, by the meaning of the verb. And affected objects, the object is changed in some way, but it's not created. So, for instance, to paint a picture, you create something, and it's in English, and then to paint a wall, the wall exists independently of the action, and so it's an affected object. German has to use in these cases two different verbs. So ein Bild malen und eine Wand anmalen or bemalen. It's very, very systematic in German. Or another thing, say, to burn bricks, Ziegel brennen, and to burn paper, Papier verbrennen. Ziegel brennen, you create something, but with paper you don't create something. Quite the contrary. And I think Italian also has this distinction. My example was, it's again la storia sentimentale. La signora Boccia vuole solo vivere la sua vita. German Leben. Sein Leben leben, gutes Leben leben. As opposed to la peggiore situazione che abbia mai vissuto. German erleben. So this is something very interesting also. You can also compare elements in the lexicon. You can find out general distinctions, and very often they have to do with these prefixes, and German behaves quite differently from English. And English very often is on the side of Italian and English are on the same side. German is different. Okay, so I think I will not go. Just mention very briefly. I think my time is up. Under 24, you find very unusual subjects, which you wouldn't be allowed in Italian or German. So English is very special. For instance, Molly refused to learn any but the 6 letters which spelled her own name. Spell is normally is done by human beings. Spell it for me. I don't know this word, spell it for me. But here you have letters spell, or money can't buy everything. People buy things in our languages. In English, you can also say money can't buy everything. So this is also a very specific property which comes out when you look at the subjects which are possible. And if you now the subject common properties, they're not agents, they're not people acting. But it's, look at money can't buy everything. This advert will sell a lot of dog food. At the end of a news program, people say in England on the radio or television, this concludes our summary of the news. This sentence. Or they can even say tomorrow will be rainy. Tomorrow is the subject of rainy. Very strange. Very strange. Now, I have 2 more things. Maybe I should only pick one of them. Progressive action, maybe. Let me take diminutives. Diminutives. Now, diminutives, if you look at the languages of Europe and how they're used, you find that Italian is very rich in diminutives. You have capo, capino, capone, and so on and so forth. And you have many of the superlative and so on. You have the augmentative also. Wonderful. You have a lot of system of, and you use them quite frequently. Quite frequently. Another language. Now, where is there another European language where they use as frequently? Yes, Dutch. Dutch use them very, very frequently. And now in Dutch, I think there's something you cannot do. You can add the suffix to any expression. You can use it to a noun. So you have a biertje, and you can use it to the noun weather. You have lekker weertje, very good weather. You can add it to a number. 100 is 100, and you can say honderdjes. These are $100 or 100 euro notes, and you can add it to a preposition. So if you take to in English, it corresponds to to in Dutch, and if you have een toetje, is something you can eat in addition to something. It's a dessert, een dolce. And if you have before, in Dutch the word is vooraf. Voorafje is a starter, hors d'oeuvre, in primo, I suppose, and so on and so forth. So these are very, very interesting. You first of all, you have difference in use. You have different in whether you use a suffix or a prefix. And in some languages, and this is the final remark I want to make, you look at Swedish before conclusions, you use adjectives which mean little, and if you add them to so kakur are cakes, and if you add little cakes, then you get biscuits. If you have further dog is an enterprise, small further dog, you can add them to adjectives. Frek is cheeky. If you say small frek, means a little bit of, or so maybe frek is impertinent and small frek is cheeky, and so forth and so on and so forth. And you can add them to verbs. So you know that laugh and smile are really related. one is the diminutive of the other. And in some languages you have, German, you have a proper, you add something that would change laugh to smile. It's also in lächeln, yeah, that's right. So to hosta or husta in Swedish is to cough. And if you say small, little coughing, that is then to cough lightly. Okay, so to summarize, what is the points I was trying to make, a comparison between Germanic languages with different subset of languages as comparison reveals different properties. Secondly, common properties of Germanic languages often manifest some considerable internal variation and new dimensions of variation. Thirdly, English is not a typical representative of Germanic languages. Members of language families seem to share a wide variety of properties, but they may also differ from the others through contact. And of course, and you cannot, but the specific properties do not allow it to speak of a special character of a language, which people have often tried to do. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.